These monstrous humanoids said to exist long before history even began. Once inhabitants to the shores and islands of the planet, now driven underground and forced to adapt to the harsh environment that is the Underdark. Today we are talking about the Kuo-Toa. Hello and welcome to Dungeon Deep Dive, where we talk about all things D&D, from monsters and their lore to news updates and tips and advice for anyone interested in Dungeons and Dragons and want to give it a try. Today we are talking about the crazed fish-like humanoid race known as the Kuo-Toa. Standing around 5 feet tall with sometimes grey, slimy, scaly skin, slender and live arms and legs despite their stumpy shape, with webbed feet and hands with sharp claws adorning them. And of course, let's not forget their most known feature, their fish-like head. The Kuo-Toa first made their appearance all the way back in 1978 in the advanced D&D module D2 Shrine of the Kuo-Toa, written by the man himself, Gary Gygax, then later on in many other modules thereafter. The history and lore behind the Kuo-Toa is kind of a sad story, really. These guys have had just a bad luck after bad luck after bad luck through their existence. The Kuo-Toa began with living on the shores and islands of the world, but eventually with their habit of sacrificing anyone they would happen to come across, the humans and other races drove them to near extinction, driving what was left of them deep underground into the Underdark. Adapting to their new lives in the Underdark, it didn't really get any easier for the Kuo-Toa. They struggled to survive with many monsters that also called the Underdark their home. Constantly on the move and getting any settlements they choose to make destroyed, they dove deeper and deeper into the Underdark. Eventually, the Kuo-Toa came into contact with Illithid, a race of humanoid looking creatures with a head that resembles that of an octopus. I'm not going to go too deep into the Illithid because there is so much that it would warrant its own separate video, so I may do that in the future. The Illithid captured the Kuo-Toa and turned them into slaves for their cities. With the Kuo-Toa being a rather simple and not very intellectual race, the Illithid's psychic abilities that they forced upon the Kuo-Toa just drove them completely insane and broke their minds completely, going entirely mad and paranoid, so much so that even after the Illithid decided to abandon them, they still retained their madness indefinitely. Now abandoned by their captors and left with their forever broken minds, the Kuo-Toa developed an obsession with creating their own idols and gods in an attempt to protect themselves from the threats of the Underdark. With their new obsession with creating gods of their own designed for protection, if enough of their community worshipped this made-up god, the worship combined with the unrelenting madness given to them from the Illithid somehow enables the god to manifest and become an actual entity. The most well-known entity created by the Kuo-Toa is Bilbadulpulup. This is the most difficult word for me to say ever. Bilbadulpulup. The Sea Mother. A female humanoid with the head of what looks like a crayfish, claws for hands, and shells covering her shoulders. This goddess of paranoia and questionable sanity is said to be created by a tribe of Kuo-Toa that discovered a female humanoid statue. They just slapped a crayfish head on there with some claws on the hand and said, hey, this is our new god. With the Sea Mother now becoming an actual entity with the worship of the Kuo-Toa, making her home in the murky depths in the elemental plane of water, it is said that Bilbadulpulup views the Kuo-Toa as her children, which I find pretty funny because the Kuo-Toa actually made the Sea Mother, but she classes them as her children. I love it. She's a ruthless god for the Kuo-Toa, filled with hatred for the streak of bad luck their children have been through, and has a special kind of bloodlust for the surface dwellers like the humans and the elves, as well as especially the Illithid and the Drow, surprisingly enough. The Sea Mother would be prone to sudden mood swings and drastic changes in behavior, and also be very secluded when it came to the other gods, not making very much, if any, contact at all to other deities in the realm. Doing this also kept all her secrets and all her power close to herself, so no one really knew anything about her or what she was capable of. As well as wanting constant sacrifices of strangely lobsters as well as other entities like drow, illithids, humans, elves, she also placed pearls above anything else as the highest form of value for her, even higher than gems and any other precious metals. She would sometimes upon their birth bless the egg of a particular Kuo-Toa, making that Kuo-Toa upon birth an exalted creature, destined for greatness by granting them tremendous amounts of physical and divine power. This power wasn't purely for the unborn eggs. This power could also be given to a full-grown Kuo-Toan. Particularly whelps or monitors she drew particular favor towards, blessing them with enormous amounts of power and making them grow into enormous sizes, becoming a Kuo-Toa leviathan. And these things are not to be messed with. We're going to go over them later in the video. There are a few other known entities that the Kuo-Toa called gods, that being certain krakens, aboliths, mokoths. Some tribes even go as far as in their madness to worship the brutal Demogorgon. Jumping into the Kuo-Toa ecology here, they would reproduce like any other fish. The females would lay their eggs in the communal pools, where the males would come to and later fertilize the eggs. The eggs would then become what is known as fingerlings, a cross between a fish and a tadpole. Once these fingerlings reach a certain age, they would have to take part in a culling ritual to reduce the numbers and not run into overpopulation. The ritual would consist of many challenges, one being a underwater maze that the fingerlings would have to traverse, filled with Ixzan, I believe that's how you say it, they're essentially the underdog's equivalent to a manta ray. Once they completed this challenge, they would then be let into their communities and finally be treated as an individual. Now, if you happen to come across any Kuo-Toa in your games, the standard Kuo-Toan is nothing really to be worried about, with the challenge rating of a quarter and the AC of 13 and only 18 hit points. One-on-one, these things aren't really a problem, but if you come across a group on your adventures in the Underdark, be mindful not to get overrun. They have an ability called outerworldly perception, which gives them the ability to sense any creature within 30 feet of them, even if that creature is invisible or even on the ethereal plane. And it can even pinpoint your precise location. It doesn't just get a feeling of where you are, it knows exactly where you are. They also have a feature called Slippery that gives them an advantage on ability checks and saving throws made to escape a grapple. So they are going to be very difficult to get a hold of. They also have a bite attack that deals 1d4 piercing damage and an attack with their spear that deals 1d6 piercing damage or 1d8 piercing if they're holding it with two hands. And they also have a range attack with their net. When on a hit, a large or smaller creature is restrained and you have to use your action to make a DC 10 strength check to break free. On a reaction, these little buggers have an ability called Sticky Shield, where if an attack made on a Kuo-Toa misses, it catches the weapon with its shield and the attacker must make a DC 11 strength save. On a fail, the weapon is stuck to the shield, and if the wielder can or won't let go, then the wielder is grappled and the weapon is stuck. The way I see this is with all these abilities combined, as well as if the Kuo-Toa are in like a group, say like 5 or 6, I feel like if the party isn't really paying attention, thinking, oh, these are just little fish people and get rid of these easy, the tables could quickly turn if a lot of these abilities stack up together. Another type of Kuo-Toa are the whips and the monitors. These two are not that different from one another, except the monitor adds its wisdom modifier to its AC, giving it an AC of 15 instead of an 11 like the whip. Also, whereas the whip gets 2 levels in spellcasting, giving it the spells Sacred Flame, Thaumaturgy, Bane, and Shield of Faith, the monitor gets instead a bite attack and 2 unarmed strikes. With the unarmed strikes, it deals just 1d6 plus 2 bludgeoning damage plus 1d6 lightning damage, and on a hit, the target cannot take reactions until the end of the monitor's turn. So this is kind of like a weaker version of Stunning Strike on the monk. The whip also has a piercing staff attack that on a hit deals 1d6 plus 2 piercing damage, and if the target is a medium or smaller creature, it is grappled and must make a DC 14 strength check to escape. Then we have essentially the popes of the Kuo-Toans, the archpriests. These entities have a challenge rating of 6 and are classed as a level 10 spellcaster. They also have a nice chunk of hit points too, sitting at a nice old 97. These spellcasters go to level 5 spell slots and have spells such as Guidance, Hold Person, Spirit Guardians, Divination, Mass Cure Wounds, and Scrying. Archpriests being the de facto leaders of the Kuo-Toa societies, they will more than likely see these in charge of any groups you find in the Underdark. 2 more creatures that are at the Kuo-Toa's disposal are the Gowpas and the terrifying leviathans that we mentioned earlier in the video. Gowpas are large monstrosities that the Kuo-Toans have captured and trained to become great tools for capturing anything that they come across. With a challenge rating of 3 and sitting at an AC of 16 and hit points of 102, this can be very dangerous to come across. Not just because it has the same outerworldly perception feature and the stack of hit points, but because of its bite and paralyzing swallow ability. The bite deals 2d6 plus 2 piercing damage, which you're like, that's okay, that's not that bad. But if the Gulper is grappling a creature that is a medium or smaller, it can then make a bite attack on that creature, and if it hits, the creature is swallowed. While the creature is swallowed, the target is restrained, blinded, and must make a DC 13 Constitution saving throw, or be paralyzed for 1 whole minute. But thankfully, you can repeat the save at the end of each of your turns. So yeah, be careful when you encounter these beasts. They could very well turn the tide in any fight. And last but certainly not least, we have the Kuo-Toa Leviathan. Sitting at a massive 20 feet tall, this Kua-Toa, blessed by Blidulpoop, with a challenge rating of 14, these things are nasty. Sitting at a chunky 196 hit points with an AC of 18, thanks to its ability Sea Mother's Blessing that lets it add its +5 wisdom to its AC. This thing is not to be messed around with. It has an ability called Improved Otherworldly Perception that can sense invisible beings and beings in the ethereal plane at a range of 60 feet instead of 30. Which, to be fair, that's kind of fair with the size of it. It's 20 feet tall, for God's sake. It can also make a multi-attack with its bite and its claws, with the bite dealing 4d10 plus 8 piercing damage, and grappling the target with a DC of 19 to escape the grapple, as well as its claws dealing 3d8 slashing damage. 5 times a day on a hit with its bite or claws, the Leviathan can attempt to stun a creature once per round with a DC 18 wisdom saving throw. On a fail, the creature is stunned for 1 round, as well as taking the normal damage from the attack. And we're not even done. If the Leviathan has a creature grappled in its mouth, it can make another bite attack, and on a hit can swallow the target, where again the creature is blinded and restrained, but also takes 9d6 acid damage at the start of each of the Leviathan's turns. The Leviathan can even swallow multiple creatures depending on the size. If you want to try and escape from the stomach from the beast, you got to do at least 40 points of damage, and then the Leviathan has to fail a DC 17 Constitution save to throw you back up. That's not... This Leviathan has a Constitution of 21. That is a +5 to its Constitution. So if you think about it, if this guy gets a bite attack and a stun on you, and then on next turn it'll have advantage on the attack to swallow you, and that is not a good place for any player to be in. All in all, I feel like the Kuo-Toa are a great and interesting race of monsters to look into and have in your games. I can see so many possibilities for story hooks with these guys. Like, say if you come across a town that's had villagers like kidnapped or disappearing through the night, and then you find out there's like a small cult of Kuo-Toa like hiding in the sewers or in the lake nearby that are sacrificing people to Blidulpoop. I'm never going to get that name right. Or maybe you're even venturing into the Underdark, and while you camp up for the night, some of your party that are on watch get captured by some Kuo-Toa or Gowpas looking for creatures to bring back to their city. Or you could even, they don't even have to be aggressive. You could find a small village of Kuo-Toa in the Underdark where they're peaceful, not very aggressive, and they worship a strange god that they created. By the way, when you're a DM, they create gods upon worship. So you can make any god you want and say they created it, and they worship it. There's so many possibilities for crazy gods that you can make up, and they could bring like offerings to it, like gems and treasures that they find, but they're just totally passive. I feel like there's so much potential with these guys just to add fun, but also tension and fear of death to your players with the Leviathan and the Gulper. I feel like that is where we're going to end the video for today, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. This one's been really fun to make and research. I feel like I've learned so much with these Kuo-Toa, and I feel like they've closely become one of my favorite races in D&D. As always, I'll have a link to all the pages I use for research in the description below. Thank you to Digi7884 for requesting I do a video on these. And let me know what other monsters you want to see me do videos on in the comments below, and I'll add your comment to the end of the video. You can find all my social down in the description box below so you don't miss a video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.